Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Jan-Benedict Steenkamp of Steenkamp.com. JB, it's awesome to have you on the show.
I'm glad to be there, Cash.
No problem. Super excited to have you on as well, too. And before we jumped in, I want to read a little bit more about JB so you're going to hear about all the awesome things that he's doing. And JB is a Knox Massey Distinguished Professor of Marketing at the University of North Carolina's Kenan-Flagler Business School. In a recent Stanford University study, he was ranked in the top 0.1 across all sciences. JB has written several books for business practitioners, his most recent one being Time to Lead, Lessons for Today's Leaders from the Bold Decisions That Changed History. In today's time of global crisis and obvious lack of faith in leaders at all levels, more than ever, we need to and can learn from the great men and women in the recent and more distant past who have faced much greater challenges. He has given executive seminars and guest lectures on all continents and to a multitude of organizations, including the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School. JB, are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
I am absolutely ready. Thank you for having me on the show.
No problem. Super excited to have you on. And what I wanted to do is to kind of kick everything off was rewind the clock a little bit, hear a little bit more on how you got started with all the awesome work that you're doing and what led you to kind of come here.
Well, since I was very young, I've always been very much interested in history. It has been, let's say my hobby. And I've learned, from early on from my father, who was a politician, essentially to learn from great historical people. Now, in my academic career, I went into marketing, but the point is, you have a lot of leadership positions there as well in professional organizations, journals, at the different universities that I worked, and so on. And then a couple of years ago, it kind of hit upon me, essentially how leadership, which I had done a lot in practice, actually how many parallels there were with marketing, because we were both talking about trying to get other people, say, to follow what you would like them to do. They may be purchasing your product, to follow your ideas and your lead, etc. And so combining marketing and leadership and infusing them with historical knowledge, which is, let's say, all the free time that I have since I was perhaps 8 or 9 or so, I read history. I tried to integrate them in this new book and to derive lessons for us today here in 2021.
Nice. I absolutely, love that. And I think it's so, powerful to be able to do that. I think so many times we forget that a lot of the lessons that we can learn from are from the past and from history. So that's why I love that, we get the opportunity to really, learn as much on how to be better leaders. And of course, learn that from the history and information from the past. And so I wanted to hear a little bit more, about your book and how you work with the clients that you have. Could you take us through a little bit more on what we can find in the book and how exactly that works?
Yeah, so what I do in the book is I identify, based on leadership work, 7 different leadership styles, meaning essentially certain behavioral patterns that you find in people. And then I illustrate and deepen our insight into each of these leadership styles with a couple of historical examples. For example, like involving George Washington or Margaret Thatcher or Franklin Roosevelt and other people, people that have faced tremendous challenges in their lives, that had to overcome sexism, racism, classism, all kind of other things, and that made courageous decisions that really changed history. And we can learn from that. We can learn from those principles here and now, just as, and that is, I think, Gresh, very important to understand, these leaders learned from each other. Let me give you one example. And many people would agree that 3 of the greatest leaders in the 20th century were Mahatma Gandhi from India, the freedom fighter in India, Martin Luther King, and President Nelson Mandela, the first democratic president of South Africa. Now, it's interesting that Dr. King's insights how to fight racism came by hearing what Gandhi had done in India. And he is very open about it. He said, now I understood how I could do it. And then he adapted to the American context. But very important, he always gave Gandhi the honor of giving him essentially the light. Now what we see is that Mandela, President Mandela, he studied the life of Dr. King. He was very aware of it and what King did. He also had to fight racism. He adapted it to South Africa, but he gave a lot of honor to King. Now what we see is that very recently, last week, the new senator from Georgia, he is a pastor of the church in Atlanta, where Dr. King was at one time the pastor, and he acknowledges a lot of, let's say, wisdom, how to fight for good things from Dr. King. So what we see here is, let's face it, the moment that people believe, well, apparently Mandela could learn something from King. I don't know. I'm much better than Mandela. King could learn something from Gandhi. Well, actually, King is not really an insightful man. I mean, I can do it all myself. King perhaps wasn't so smart. I am. I think actually most people would say this pretty crazy. If people like Mandela, if people like King, if they say, I learned a lot from previous examples, why should we not?
Yeah, that's absolutely powerful. And you know what was coming, the phrase that was coming to me is, success leaves clues. And I'm not sure where that phrase came from, but it's kind of that concept where a lot of times we're trying to look outward to find success, but a lot of times history allows us those seeds, those principles. That's why I love your book, because it allows people to really understand those things, to incorporate it based off the history and based off the due diligence and the knowledge that you have as well too.
Yeah, as you can tell from my accent, I wasn't born in America. I was born in the Netherlands in Europe. And one of the things that having come to America is that, Americans not always have as much appreciation or deep knowledge of history as perhaps sometimes would be good. Just let me tell you one anecdote. The early 2000s, a friend of mine asked, after the American forces invaded Afghanistan, how long do you think this war lasts? I said, I don't know, but I do know one thing. It took Alexander the Great, the greatest military genius in history, more time to subdue Afghanistan than to subdue the rest of the huge Persian Empire. And I said, there's no general that comes close to Alexander the Great. So he said, if I just look at that parallel, I'm not optimistic. Unfortunately, I was right. As we speak here today, there are still troops in Afghanistan. Afghanistan still hasn't been pacified. It doesn't mean that history always repeats itself fully 100%, but if we would have a little bit more appreciation of history, we would become much better leaders. If Bush in 2003 had even remotely understood the difference between Sunnis and Shiites and the enmity between them, etc., he would not have made the colossal mistakes that he made, with which we are still burdened. So the point is, there is a lot to be learned, but we need to adapt it to the present day situation. And that's what I've done in this book.
Nice. Absolutely appreciate that. And I think that if we think about, business and life and everything we're doing, we're trying to increase the likelihood of us being successful. And the way by which to do that, I think, is knowledge. But the more knowledge you have, you don't guarantee success, but you get yourself as close to increasing the likelihood of you being successful, which is why I love, you being able to kind of put that information together, for us to hear. And so I wanted to ask you now for what I call your secret sauce. And it could be for you personally or your book or a combination of both. But what do you feel kind of sets it apart, or you apart, and makes it unique?
Well, I think what I won't say what sets me apart. I will say what sets the book apart is that it straddles history and leadership. Biographies are very popular, but the point is, a biography is often 900 pages long, which is kind of really long, and it isn't written to draw out the leadership lessons. And it is still only one person, however valuable that may be. Leadership books many of them are full of hot air. They're war stories. They are stories about, I did this so great and I did that so great. Unfortunately, a couple of years later, it's not so nice. I mean, the boss of Jack Welch, he was seen as the greatest manager on earth. I mean, he ran essentially General Electric into the ground. In a sense, he built a framework which was built on hot air. Zuckerberg with Facebook, he has gotten a lot of flack. He was seen as the greatest visionary since Christ, and it didn't work out so well. So many of these leadership books, unfortunately, they are very, I consider them to be mostly hot air. And what they also say, Gresh, is there is only one way to truth. Essentially, they're like a religion. There is only one path to eternal salvation, and that is you have to be a servant leader. You have to follow those 10 laws, and they're also always going to get good. Or you have to be a charismatic leader, etc. And that is pure nonsense. Because if you happen to have that personality, those particular skills, that is fine. But many people are not charismatic, or they are not by nature a servant leader. And what I show in this book is that is perfectly fine. Yes, in an ideal world, you have everything. Well, in an ideal world, I look like Brad Pitt. The point is that doesn't help us. That doesn't help the reader, because they will never find themselves into the kind of person that there will be such a huge gap between what they are and then what this ideal point is that the guru is selling. And that kind of motivated me with this book, because I've read a lot of leadership stuff, and I've done it, but also read it. And in my studies, I did a lot of leadership and so on. It never resonated to me, because I looked then around and I saw, actually, life is a lot more complex than what is seen here. And I see some guys, being very successful leaders in business or in churches or in countries that are absolutely have nothing in common with a servant leader. Say, you think about servant leader, President Xi of China, you may or may not like him, but he's pretty successful. Or Steve Jobs of Apple. Servant leader, he was very dictatorial. Apparently, he was very successful too. So the point is, there are many ways to Rome. And that was what interested me. So in this book, if you read this book, you will find things that will resonate with your qualities, with your personality, with your things. And as General Holt writes in the foreword to the book, and he's a very experienced, very senior general in the United States Air Force, he agreed with me in that he said, you cannot become the person that you are not, but you can improve upon the person that you are. And I think that is a very deep insight, and my book is about that.
Awesome. I absolutely love that, JB. And also often I'll say, if you run your own race, you can never lose. It's when we get caught running somebody else's race that we end up losing. And I think that I love that the book is kind of like a toolbox, I guess you can say. You pick the tool that works best with you, that you can leverage and use the best in order to be successful and be a great leader. And so I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or a habit that you have. What's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
In my own life, which makes me more effective, is I have done actually the leadership tests that I've in my book. I have applied those to myself. So I developed those tests based on my work in psychometrics, it's mathematical psychology. So I developed these self-assessment tests, and then I did the test myself. And actually, I found some pretty interesting things that I noted. Hey, actually, I'm a little different than what I thought I would be. I did not always like it, what I found. But when I thought, my first point was that this is clearly nonsense. Then the second point is I say, well, actually, perhaps there is some truth in it, and better work on it. And so what I found was eye-opening is I developed those tests based on, the kind of knowledge of test construction, etc., that I've done for multiple decades. Then I applied them to myself, and even though I developed the test myself, I learned new things about myself. And not all of it was what I would like to see, but that is also leadership, that you accept sometimes things that are not so nice, and then you work on them.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think so many times where I've taken, different tests, is sometimes people will say you may not accept or may not like, or you at first glance, you might push back against whatever it is that you see. But a lot of times that speaks to the human aspect, I think, of us as well, too, is where we're not perfect. We're not all Brad Pitt, as you said, these
Yeah.
are different flaws and different things. But I think that's what makes us unique. That's what makes us special. And that's what allows us to lead in our own special way.
Gres, your point is so on target. That makes us special. That is, no two human beings are the same. That means, therefore, that there cannot be one road to success. Otherwise, would only be one person successful. And many people are successful with their unique qualities. And that, in my view, offers tremendous hope and inspiration, which I think the country at this point also really needs. The country needs good leadership, but people have all their individual qualities, and there is room for these different qualities. But what is, I think, without any doubt, is that by assessing where you stand, what your strengths and weaknesses are in terms of leadership we're talking about here, is necessary to take the next step. Because if you don't have self-insight, it is very difficult to improve yourself. And that's why I have these tests in the appendices of the book, and telling, okay, based on particular scores, go here, go there, go A to go B. And we are all unique, and we do have very different qualities, and that makes, I think, us as a diverse and powerful nation. And actually, it's mankind, which is, people are different and unique.
Yeah, and I think it at the end of the day makes each of us better, makes the world better, because you have iron sharpen iron, so to speak, and that self awareness is a key part towards understanding how you can improve and get better. Because you don't have awareness for self, how do you know what to improve and where to improve it? And so, what would you consider to be what I call your CEO nugget? So this could be a word of wisdom or a piece of advice. It might be something in your book, or it might be something, if you were to hop into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
Um, I would say, for CEOs and also for their people, what I find is there are two things that I do find are clearly related to impactful leadership. First is to have grit, to have essentially the motivation and also the resilience and the focus to overcome adversity, which we all are going to run into life. And you can increase your grit, but without grit, it is very hard to essentially to succeed. And you can succeed in different ways, but if we are, regardless of the path you take, there will be disappointments, there will be things that don't go your way, and then the ability to go on. A second thing that I have found is, for people that are truly, the most impactful leaders are people that have an overarching goal for what they want to achieve in life. Um, Now, that goal may evolve over time, and for some people, they have it already at an early instance. I was blessed at an early instance that I had that goal in my life, and I targeted everything. And one of my sons, from 15 years on, he knew that he wanted to become a major player in the financial industry. Now, I'm not arguing whether it's a good or a bad goal, that's irrelevant. And based on, from that moment on, everything that he did was focused on that goal, which meant that he now is not even 30. He is already at a rank and at the salary, which is, let's say, not normal, quote unquote, for his age. And the main reason is because he put all his time, all his effort, the focus of his study, the focus of things besides his study, what he was reading in his spare time, etc., on achieving that goal. Now, the some people have it early, some people get it a bit later in life, and you have also people that never get it in life, and you may be successful without having ever gotten it in life. But in principle, if you know where you are going, what you want to achieve, that is one of the most valuable things that I have found, and that has helped me tremendously in my life.
Absolutely. I appreciate those two things. And the phrase that I've heard, said, I'm not sure if somebody coined it, but grit gets goals is so huge. And to be able to have that grit and to develop that, but also have that singular focus towards whatever that goal might be. And understanding that, it's not always going to be a perfect straight line, but you have the grit and you have the resilience, as you said so well, to be able to get over whatever hump or speed bump or pitfall that might come about. It's so important towards increasing your likelihood of being successful. And so I wanted to ask you now my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And we're hoping to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So JB, what does being a CEO mean to you?
I think that we have being a CEO is formally speaking, say the leader of a company. In my view, the really meaningful, impactful CEO is not a caretaker, but has a true vision for the company, where to go, and has the ability to get the organization into the direction that they want to achieve. And that, in my view, sets apart the CEOs that change the company and perhaps even a little bit change the world versus the CEOs that are very good caretakers of the company, but do not really take the company to a next level.
Nice. I absolutely appreciate that. And it's so huge to be able to have that vision and be able to kind of execute that on that vision, but understand that it's also a team sport, so to speak, and be able to bring people along and lead them in such a great way, an impactful way.
Yeah, just an example to illustrate it. Although, again, as I said earlier, contemporary business examples are in that always a little bit dangerous because things can change. But just give an example. The good differences between, let's say, as the CEO of Tesla versus the CEO of Ford or General Motors or Volkswagen. In my view, and I don't want to insult anybody, that the CEOs of these other companies, they are good caretakers and they make some changes in the company. So nothing wrong with that. Once, if they retire, how will they be remembered? Well, I leave that to the listener, but I think for many people, who can remember who the CEO before Mary Barra was? I'm some of them, probably most of them cannot, because they were just caretakers, tinkerers. We look at Elon Musk. He had a vision about, the electric car. So he had really a vision what he wanted to do with the company. Now, what you currently have, of course, is the value of Tesla is, I must admit, ridiculously high. And I would argue that there is froth in there as well. But nobody can argue that the vision that Musk has with Tesla has fired up many more people within the organization, and to be honest, also in the financial markets, than the, in my view, lack of vision, or relative lack of vision, I should probably say, of the top CEOs of a Ford or General Motors, a Volkswagen, a Toyota, etc. And of course, they would disagree with it. But Gres, let's just look at the stock price.
Mm-hmm.
It is that you see the financial markets. There is froth in there, but the financial markets, they reward CEOs that have a clear vision, because then they understand, okay, this is where you want to go. There are problems, but if you can explain where you want to go, how that prepares your company for the year 2030, 2040, how that fits into the bigger scheme, that excites people more, because if people buy into your vision, it is good for the company and it is good for the shareholders.
Absolutely. Yeah, you create that win-win-win opportunity. And I love that question that you said, asking yourself how you will be remembered. And I think if you really put that through the vantage point, it starts to maybe have people adjust or maybe reflect and look at their vision and see the impact that they're ultimately having. So JB, truly appreciate that definition. I appreciate your time even more. What I want to do is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional you can let our readers and listeners know, and of course, how best they can get a hold of you, get a copy of the book, and hear about all the awesome things that you're working on.
So when I said earlier that these two things that my work has shown, I mean, both practical, but also in the book is the vision and the grit. If listeners are wondering how am I doing on those things, and there are, you know, measurement instruments in the appendix of the book, so that you can just in the safety of your own room can answer the questions truthfully and identify whether you are lacking there or not. So you can assess these things with yourself. A final thing that I want to say about the vision thing and about the CEOs, if I may, Gresh, is the following. If I look at it, is very important to attract the best and the brightest. Our MBA students, for example, if they could choose between working for Tesla, a company with a clear vision, you know, clearly it's clear what they're standing for, what they're going to, versus working for General Motors. We do respect for General Motors, but I don't think there would be a single person that would prefer GM to Tesla. So there is, I think, a vision is good for the company, for the employees, current employees, for the shareholders. It's also good to attract the best and the brightest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you have that singularity of vision, you're able to express that. It comes out so well, not to the people that are within the organization, but also to the people that are outside the organization, maybe even wanted to be a part of that. And so I absolutely love that you covered that in your book. For people that want to get a copy of that, what's the best way for them to do that?
The easiest way is to purchase it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, or any other bookstore or online. Probably a lot easier than going to a physical bookstore themselves.
Yes, absolutely. And to make that even easier, we'll have the links and information in the show notes as well as your information. But I definitely appreciate you, JB, again, and I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful to be on your show.
All right, and I'll cut it off here. Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and we had a phenomenal interview with Jan-Benedict Steenkamp of Steenkamp.com. And JB, you provided loads of information. I appreciate you for all the work that you're doing and also the relevance of all the information that we're going to talk about in this bonus section. And for people that might just be listening to this, could you tell us a little bit more about you and your book and all the awesome things that you're working on?
Yeah, thank you, Gresh, to have me on your show. I was born in the Netherlands, and I moved to the United States in 2006 and became a US citizen 2016, married a wonderful American wife. And I'm a professor at Kenan-Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina. And I've had a lot of leadership positions in my life. Obviously, being at the business school, I should know a bit about business as well. And I'm a history buff. I've studied history since early on, and I've actually taken a lot of my cues. I've actually used a lot of history also in my marketing research, interestingly enough. And I put these insights and other things together in my new book, Time to Lead, Lessons for Today's Leaders from Bold Decisions That Changed History. It features a number of short case studies of 16 leaders that really changed the world, organized by leadership styles. And the book features a foreword by Major General Cameron Holt. He is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the US Air Force and one of the main leaders in our country.
Nice. I absolutely appreciate that, JB. And I think that came up, a lot, during the interview about, especially there's not one way to lead. There's not one way to skin a cat, so to speak, and understanding the different ways by which people can lead to reach and get to their success, and how important the vision is, and so many different things, so much of value that you provided in your book, but also in the podcast interview itself. So I know what we talked a little bit offline was the relevance of everything that's happening as we're recording this right now, in the United States, right outside of me in Washington, D.C., with Donald Trump, with President Trump, with Joe Biden. So could you talk a little bit more about that and the relevance and how that may have or is already kind of, I guess, talked about in your book?
Yeah, so I think everybody would agree that this was a major and dark moment in our history. Actually, people also from overseas reached out to me and likened it to the last days of Rome or of the last days of the Weimar Republic. Now we are talking about the last days before Hitler came to power. Now, obviously, these are dark comparisons, but I do not think that they are completely idiotic. This is something that is worthy of a banana republic, not of the oldest democracy on earth. The, the important thing to realize, I think, is that the country in the past has also been divided, has had incredible crises to overcome. And we have had people that rose to the occasion. What people don't always know is that one of the greatest crises that the country faced was the potential of a military insurrection in 1783, the so-called Newburgh Conspiracy, where actually the rich civilian financiers of the Independence War and military leaders were very disgruntled with essentially with the Continental Congress, and they were planning a military coup temporarily to bring peace to the country. And they reached out to Washington as the commander-in-chief to lead that coup and to become essentially the military dictator. As always, it is only for a limited period of time. Now, whereas what we have seen recently with the sitting president inciting people to essentially stage something that I would see, well, actually, it reminds me of a coup, what is happening there if you're invading the capital. What Washington did, and as I describe in my book in detail, his leadership is he dampened it. So the military officers were very disgruntled and he calmed them down. He made it very clear he wasn't only going to be not a part of it, but he persuaded them to essentially follow the civilian leadership and not grab power. So that is the direct opposite to President Trump. President Trump is inciting the masses. General Washington, that he was at the time, was dampening the masses. And his leadership stands in stark contrast to that of Donald Trump. We have had other situations of tremendous turmoil in the country, obviously the Civil War, terrible, and also 1932, 1933, when the country was torn apart by the Depression. So what I hope is everybody's hope is now on president-elect, and as when people hear that it is President Biden, that he is able to heal the country, because I think for everybody that has some keen historical insight, it is clear that the country cannot go on like this, because the country with such divisions will tear itself apart. As a keen student of history, we have to realize, Gresh, that countries, that large entities, they can fall apart. So they are not set in stone. Nobody thought that Rome would fall, but the Roman Empire disintegrated. Other ones disintegrated. So what we need in Washington now is a president that will heal the different groups, and it will be a tremendous challenge, but There is this old saying in America, and I pray that is going to be this: cometh the hour, cometh the man. And I do hope that President Biden is going to be the man. That will require, by the way, Gresh, some sacrificial leadership, because what he will have to do is to compromise with the other side, to give in on some of the things that he can democratically push through Congress, that some of the people in his party like, and I understand that that is the democratic right. But unfortunately, we have seen in more recent years what doing it completely along a partisan way is doing to the country. And hopefully he will find a way to take his inspiration from people like Washington, from Lincoln, who, by the way, continuously tried to engage everybody, although, we all know that didn't go so well. Hopefully that is not going to go a second time. Or like FDR. Those were people that reached across the aisle, so to speak, to heal the nation. And we need a leader that can do that. And we have examples, historical examples of great American leaders that did just that. And we need that again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I definitely appreciate you for adding, that on into the bonus section. And I think that the word that you used, and I heard consistently with the word healing, and that's something that's needed in so many different aspects. And I think it needs a certain type of leadership in order for that to happen. So I appreciate you for obviously, writing the book, creating the book with those different ways to lead. Because I think that so many times, as we kind of talked about during the interview, we think that there's one way to lead, there's one way to do this, there's one way to do that. But I think that this will definitely, probably, for lack of a better term, require a lot of hybrid leadership skills and understanding of the different ways that people have done it in history, which are definitely in your book. And I think that it's definitely disturbing. What I saw, what everybody else is probably listening saw as well too. It's scary, and hopefully, prayfully, things will continue to get better, and will get better as a result of the leadership that we'll see from not just President-elect Biden, but so many other people that will require that leadership too. So I think that it's a call for us. It's a call for them. It's a call for all of us, really, to take on what needs to be done to make things better and to heal the world. So, JB, I truly appreciate you for hopping on this bonus section again, for all the work that you do. For people that might want to get a hold of you or hear more about the book, what's the best way for them to do that?
Um, well, you can go to my website, www.jbsteenkamp.com. And there you find information, some recent activities, podcasts, and other kind of things, plus also a link to the book. You can also, if you are interested in the book, you can easily check it out on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles or something like that. Just type in my name and it should pop up. People that are interested to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn, posting new materials and insights and articles. Please send me a connect, and I'm happy to connect with you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And to make that even easier, we'll have the links and information in the show notes. But thank you again so much again, JB, and I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Thank you very much. You too. Thank you for having me on your show, Gresh.